Hello there and welcome to this video. If you are the type of person that would be open to reading a story that may involve gay characters and even a potential subtle romance involving gay characters, then this book could be for you. I'm going to be reviewing this book, Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. And I want to say first off, how I came about this book was my girl and I had gone out and we did a challenge to each other. We said, let's go into a bookstore and we each pick a almost random book for each other. So not quite just like walking in blindly picking a random book, but making walking through the aisles, finding something that might catch our eye and then giving it to the other person. And they have to read it. So she's reading a book about the business of hip hop, and she got me this book after just a few minutes of looking in the bestsellers section. And initially I read it, I was a little concerned. I was not sure I would enjoy the book because, I'm a straight man and I don't typically read fiction even. So initially, I was like, oh, am I going to enjoy this? What's this about? I don't want something gratuitous or whatever. But after reading it, I have come to enjoy this take on the subject of death specifically, and even some of the characters are very interesting. As soon as I started reading, the main character, Wallace, is just this very hard. He's a hard ass. He's a stern guy. He's a businessman, and that was pretty compelling to me. I thought that was interesting. And then of course, as you progress, you find out his interests and all that. And I don't want to spoil too much for it, but just the first few paragraphs alone, you find out the type of guy he is. And throughout this book, you learn a lot about TJ Klune's take on death and what happens when you die, basically. And that was probably the most fascinating thing to me is he created this entire example, not a world, but an entire situation or entire perspective, entire take on what happens in the afterlife, after you die, after you pass, after all of these things. And I thought that was a really great take on it, a very interesting perspective, very unique, even compared to some of the takes on death that we might have found in ancient times, which were like fire and brimstone, and it takes on death in modern times, which might involve a miracle on Fifth Street. Is it a miracle on Fifth Street? The one where the guy's standing. It's a famous movie. I can't remember the exact title. I know it's famous. I should know it. But and then other titles such as anything with like a ghost. I mean, Ghost is a good one with Demi Moore. Those types of stories. But TJ Klune definitely takes this concept of death and grief and relationships and love. I mean, the main characters are queer, LGBTQIA plus, gay, whatever. But there's so many more other characters that within the story are very relatable. The loss of somebody, the relationships, and how people grieve, how people get over loss, how people get stuck with loss. And this book does an amazing job of really taking on that challenge. And when whether you've lost someone or not, which probably everyone watching this video has experienced it at some point or will experience it at some point, whether it be like a pet, a friend, a family member, whatever that is. There's probably always a question of what happens afterwards. And, maybe TJ Klune does not have those answers of what really happens, but he does an amazing job of sharing ways or potential alternate reality of what could happen after death, or what happens in life after death, or death after death, or whatever you want to call it. And I think that was the most powerful thing in this entire story, is that there's so many characters, so many experiences with people dying, and not just like the how what people experience when someone else dies, but what might be experienced by the person who has died. And that is so interesting. It is definitely a world that's can be hard to explore, that can be hard to write about, because we don't know what happens. And with all that said, um, I just there's just so many things that he puts into this, so many creative elements that, if you're looking for, I don't know, closure in some way, or you'd like to just have a different perspective on the topic, or the topic of death and grief, or maybe you're just going through some challenging times, or just need something that the book feels good, the story feels good, but at the same time, it also provides like an emotional release, in the sense of, you know, how do people cross over? This book is very powerful. It has a lot of creativity to it. So, as you can tell, I don't really. This is probably the first full fiction book that I've read in like 2 years. I'm not very much for fiction, but the challenge is a challenge. I came up with the challenge, and this is the book I got. And Death is Only the Beginning. It's a great read. And with that said, there's way more compelling characters too. They're very well written. They're very well thought out. Their experiences, and I would say that even in a part of the book, there was a part of the book that felt a little slow in terms of its pacing and what happens next. I was wondering, oh, when's it going to get to the good part? When's it going to get to the good part? And that was in the middle. But I also feel that that was written in a way where it's almost purposeful. Like, without spoiling the book, what happens when you die, at some level you probably don't know. You might be stuck in a limbo or something. So with that said, there is a moment in the book where you almost have that feeling like, oh, what's next? What's next? You don't really know what's next. And if I was to ask TJ Klune a question, I would be like, hey, was that done on purpose? Because if it was, it's genius. And if it wasn't, it was still great writing. Good job in creating that emotional effect, even whether you did it on purpose or not. And with that said, good book. It's a New York Times bestseller. The author has won many awards, written many great books, fictions, and ultimately, I know the topic of death is hard to talk about, but this really is. The book has a great ending, and it gives closure to the characters and the events and the situations, and it's a fun, feel good, lighthearted read at the end. But throughout most of it, I mean, it does touch on some very challenging subjects. So be prepared um, to come with it from the perspective of an adult and all of those things. Like maturity, I guess you would say. But with that said, it does have a great ending, happy ending. So with that, thank you for watching this video. Hope you enjoy whatever the next book that you read is, and be sure to check out Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune.